Welcome to this mental availability assessment video. If you can, flick on to a full screen because some of these slides have a reasonable amount of detail. At SmilingCFO, we want to create an environment where every marketer is revered across their organization for being both brilliant at creativity and for their in-depth knowledge of the science of marketing. And with this in mind, we believe every marketer should have access to the mental availability scores for their brand. So, over the coming minutes, we're going to walk you through what a mental availability assessment is and how you use the results to inform stronger hypotheses and objectives that ultimately get you to a more compelling brand strategy. So, let's start with the widely accepted premise that brands grow by being easy to think of and easy to buy. And most specifically for mental availability, that means being easy to think of in buying situations. So having established what mental availability is, let's move on to the mental availability assessment framework. And at this point, I want to give credit to the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and most specifically to Professor Jenny Romaniak, who has written this brilliant book called Better Brand Health that really is the foundation for this methodology. Okay, so there are 4 key inputs that you will need. The first is you need to know your category buyer, and they're not necessarily the buyer of your brand. You need to know the buying situations for the category that you're researching. You then need to know what the category entry points are for that specific category. Now, these are the memory retrieval cues or mental pathways that link the buying situations to the brands. And you will need a representative group of brands, small, medium, and large. And then if you've run the methodology correctly, and we will take you through more detail shortly, then you will get a strong set of mental availability metrics, the umbrella one being mental market share, and the 3 diagnostic metrics sitting beneath that of mental penetration, network size, and share of mind. So let's have a look at the mental availability metrics in a little bit more detail. You'll see them here embedded in part of our process. Now we start with prompted brand awareness before we get to mental availability metrics. And that's because we want to know, is my brand associated with the correct category? Then we ask, what is my share of all of the links that are made between the category entry points and the brands? And you can think of this a little bit like your sales market share, where you're keen to understand what's my share of all of the sales in the market. Here, you want to understand what's my likelihood of being retrieved in a buying situation compared to my competitive set in the category. And then you'll remember there's 3 diagnostic tools that sit below mental market share. Mental penetration being a key one because it's a good step on from prompted brand awareness. You'll want to know how many category buyers can link my brand to at least one category entry point. Share of mind, which is really a more powerful measure for larger brands, but it helps them understand how vulnerable they are to competitor incursion. And then network size identifies for you the average number of category entry points that are linked to your brand. And we'll look a little bit against benchmarks for FMCG within this video. Now you're probably asking which are the metrics that I should focus on initially. Well, if you're a smaller brand, definitely prompted awareness and then mental penetration. And for all small and mid-sized brands, mental penetration is a key metric, but also network size, because network size helps you understand whether you're building wider, fresher networks. And then, as I mentioned earlier, share of mind really is an appropriate measure for larger brands rather than small. And then mental market share will apply whether you're a small brand, a medium-sized brand, or a large brand. To bring this to life for you, I thought it would be helpful to take you through a case study. Now, this is for the premium lager category. We've used category buyers from the London area and the data that you will see is real. I've just anonymized the actual brand that we did the work for. But firstly, the methodology. So we have found, and this is in line with Jenny Romaniak's recommendations, that you need a qual part to the research and a quant part to your research. Now, the qual is based on the 7 W's framework that you will find in the book Better Brand Health. And from there, we take the category entry points that we've identified through this process, normally between 25 and 30 of them, and we put it into quant, and our partner for this process is YouGov. We then take those results, put them through our model, and that actually then gives us the numbers that we need. Okay, so in this particular instance, there were 300 category buyers in our sample. We identified 23 important category entry points for this particular category. And we put 19 brands, which remember, they need to be a cross-section of small, medium, and large. We put 19 brands into the research and spoke to 18 to 34-year-olds. So our quant research then identified that there were 12,500 links made between the category entry points and the brands in the research. And for the brand that we've identified for this case study, there were 567 links made across those 23 category entry points, which means that their mental market share was 4.6%. Now, moving forward through the process a little bit, what we're able to do is then capture the mental market share, the mental penetration, the share of mind, and the network size, which are really useful numbers, but unless you've got the competitor context, they probably don't mean too much, which is why on the left-hand side, you can see that we've put the leader in the table, and their mental market share is 9.4% compared to our brand of 4.6%. And the top 5 brand is 8.2%. So this brand has some work to do. And if you then want to understand, well, how strong are these scores in the context of the overall FMCG market, then we're able to show that as well. So really interestingly, the top score that we found in our database so far for mental market share is 21%. The leader average across our categories is 14%, and yet in this very, very competitive lager market, the leader only has 9.4%. But all of this data allows us then to move through to forming hypotheses. So this really is where it starts to get exciting, because you have your evidence in the box on the left. You can identify how you're benching against the competition and highlight some areas that you want to work on. So in this instance, with this particular brand, we identified mental penetration and network size. And then as we start to think about the hypotheses that might then help drive future growth, we look at areas such as what's our reach like, what's our messaging, what's our branding, what are the competitors doing, how does it fit within perhaps that overall organization's portfolio, or perhaps there's even a physical availability challenge that we need to get after. Now, for this particular brand, we identified a hypothesis that said we're not reaching enough non-buyers and we're missing important CEPs. And for network size, we identified that the messaging might be too narrow. And actually, we're part of a portfolio where certain other brands in that organization are sitting in the same spaces. So we're able to take all of this information and start to build a strategic framework. Now, we won't go through all of this detail today, but I wanted to show you how powerful a mental availability assessment can be to help you get to objectives, strategy, actions, and most importantly, the metrics that matter. Okay, So that's our whistle-stop tour on the power of mental availability assessments. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please just send us a WhatsApp or take a look at this additional blog. Everything you wanted to learn about mental availability, but were hesitant to ask. There's some additional FAQs there for you. Okay, until the next time. Thanks a lot.